proposal that we are discussing today focuses on the concept of creating a poverty defense.
How would this proposal prevent those struggling economically throughout the region from just coming to Seattle to shoplift because they know they can claim poverty as a defense?
And you're hearing there from Seattle City Council members Alex Peterson and Lisa Herbold with two different viewpoints on a proposal that is right now in Councilmember Herbold's Public Safety Committee. Should the city add a new defense against the prosecution of misdemeanors on the basis that the crime was committed to meet a basic need? Is the council out of order? Am I out of order? This whole court is out of order. I'm Brian Callanan, a host on Seattle Channel. The views expressed here are my own, and welcome once again to Seattle News, Views, and Brews. I'm joined by the man who prefers legal briefs to legal boxers. That's Kevin Schofield of Seattle City Council Insight. Hello, Kevin.
Hey there. And just in contrast to you, I am perfectly ordered today.
Yes.
Perfectly ordered.
That's good.
Nothing's
Someone's got to
out of
do
order.
it. Someone's got to pull it together here. I want to give a shout out, as always, to City Grind Espresso, the background noise sponsor for the audio podcast. It, of course, the coffee stand on the first floor of City Hall. Closed during the pandemic. Please help them out. Other small businesses online if you can. Thanks also to our patrons on Patreon for helping us keep this show running. Josh and Dave just joined us. Thank you very much, gentlemen. We are on episode 50 this month. Could not have done it without you. Very, very cool to be with you here. We're going to be answering some of our listeners' questions with a special patrons-only podcast this week, too. So if you can, please do support independent local journalism. Just a few bucks a month really helps out here. Also, check out Seattle News, Views, and Brews on Patreon whenever you get a chance. Finally, a big shout out to Converge Media for this awesome t-shirt. And I think Kevin's showing the colors too.
Oh, I got the hoodie on. I got the hoodie.
Got it going. Converge, of course, airs the video version of this podcast. We really appreciate it. It's on every Wednesday night at 6 o'clock. All right, off we go with right here, right now. So here we are in mid-December, and as promised, Councilmember Lisa Herbold is working on a misdemeanor proposal. She has a special committee meeting coming up on the 17th. Now, this proposal, it's not a bill yet. It has been widely criticized, though, as giving anyone who commits a misdemeanor a get-out-of-jail-free card. I want to table that discussion for just a second, Kevin, and talk about this with some backstory here. I know advocates like the Department of Public Defense, Decriminalize Seattle, are pushing for this. They're saying with these misdemeanor crimes, theft, trespassing, things of this nature, shoplifting, I should say, putting people in jail is not working. It's not a deterrent. Let's try something else. So, Kevin, just looking at this in practice, in the court, what would this proposal actually do? Can we look at that?
So actually, in practice, in the court, this proposal would not change much.
It's happening right now.
There's already what's called a common law defense for poverty, for fulfilling basic needs. This would codify that, and
yes.
For
at the city level, right.
Seattle-based misdemeanors. And so I guess at some level, it would make it a little easier to plead that. And kind of be a little more specific about the cases in which that's true. But at the end, it really doesn't actually change that much. This is something that, local judges have said they're already taking into consideration.
Right. Yeah. Judges take this into account when they're looking at these different cases. And importantly,
I do think it's important.
Looks at this. Yeah.
I was going to say, I do think it's important to note here that, when this originally came up in the context of budget discussion a few weeks back, it was not only poverty defense, but also mental health defense.
I was going to say, and that's a big part of it, because I know City Attorney Pete Holmes has said, now, wait a minute, talking about shoplifting is one thing, but talking about mental health is another. Let's try to break that down.
Yeah. So what Councilmember Herbold is saying right now is she's going to punt the mental health issues till farther down the line.
Right.
And just focus on the poverty defense, which again is already something basically it's in common law practice. Already.
Yeah.
So it would just be codifying what is an existing practice already.
Right. And I guess I'm looking at this from another side, though, too, here, Kevin. Business owners, I know a lot of them are not happy about this. And I think the criticism that I'm hearing from a lot of people in that camp, it really does stick with me here. Changing our legal system, okay, that's one thing. Or maybe not a huge change here, but codifying it at the city level, that's one thing. But if there are not resources on the other side of the courtroom when these cases are dismissed, then who are we really helping here? And I think that's still a big question.
Yeah, and that's very true. And we, the same argument with, homelessness and a bunch of other things, right? We clearly need more resources to be sort of helping people out of poverty and out of homelessness and out of, the other economic issues that are really hurting a lot of people in our community right now. But that said, it's also very clear that incarcerating them is not helping them. Right. There's just ample evidence, reams of evidence that show that incarcerating people, especially for these, crimes of poverty, just help them. In fact, in a lot of ways, it just makes it worse, because then they have a criminal record. It's harder for them to get a job. It's harder for them to do things. So,
find a place to live, any of that. Yeah.
Well, and it's a tough situation, because there's also issues of, these crimes do in fact hurt store owners, right? It costs them money, right? And if this becomes, an affirmative defense for, for misdemeanor, theft, then who repays the store owners for the losses?
Are we just setting up a fund to repay store owners? I mean, how does that? That seems a little off too. So in your opinion, it doesn't seem like a lot would potentially change at the city level if indeed this was passed, because we've heard so many people going crazy about it. I mean, Councilmember Peterson was saying this might impact the Senate races in Georgia. No one's going to, the optics of this look really bad for Seattle. Your thoughts about this? Does it have a larger impact than that, do you think?
I think we'd have to look to see in practice what the impact is over time, because this is, this is an affirmative defense that somebody would actually have to choose to use in court, right?
They basically admit the crime.
It isn't like judges say, "Oh, you like you're poor. Sorry, you're not going to do this," right? It would have to be a case, and part of that is we'd have to see what the city attorney's office would do in terms of choosing which of these crimes to prosecute. Right.
Yeah.
And the city attorney is already saying, for a lot of these, they choose, they often choose not to bring them.
Right? Not doing it anyway. So. All right. Well, I know a lot still ahead with Councilmember Herbold working on this week and in the future. So we're going to keep an eye on that one. But I really wanted to touch on one of the huge stories of the past week here. The mayor is not going to be running again. Mayor Jenny Durkan not going to be running again. And the council is actually this week passing an ordinance to pay for the legal fees in Mayor Jenny Durkan's recall case that was thrown out by the Supreme Court. So not getting recalled, but she's also not running for re-election here. Kevin, this was a very interesting one to me. I think a lot of Mayor Durkan's top staff were surprised by this as well. Were you surprised by this decision from Mayor Durkan?
No, and I started to put the pieces together on this from looking at kind of her reaction at the end of budget process, when she basically just said, "Yeah, okay, well, I'll go along with
after fighting for so long."
And then last weekend, when I saw on the council's introduction referral calendar that the thing you mentioned, that they are going to be voting on Monday as to whether to cover $240,000 in legal expenses.
Right.
I mean, the mayor originally made a big point out of saying that she was covering her legal expenses herself on this. Thinking about, to me, that sort of cinched it. It's like, she's not running for re-election. Right? That would look so horrible for somebody who is running for re-election. It would just be like, whoever she was running against, that would be the big talking point, would be like, look how much city money is being wasted,
how much she cost us on
your legal expenses for mishandling, the protests.
Right.
And it's like, she just wouldn't have done that.
I know a lot of her top people were leaving too over the past week, which led to some speculation here as well. But I want to try to look at what's next here. I know Jenny Durkan has said she has not been contacted to join the Biden administration. We'll see how that plays out. She wants to focus on the problems Seattle has right now. So what does freeing herself from the election campaign and all that means there do for her, do for our city in terms of getting some things done? I really thought first of her past life as the U.S. attorney who brought the consent decree case against the Seattle PD here. I wonder if she's got her eye on those SPOG negotiations right now and saying, all right, let's finish this thing. Your thoughts about where she goes from here?
I think the SPOG one is going to be a big deal. I think, talking to folks in the mayor's office, they're spending an enormous amount of time right now trying to figure out the plan for rolling out vaccinations in the city.
Right.
Including, the city's own employees, the police department, fire department, as well as looking at, frontline medical workers. It's going to be months before we have a large supply of vaccine here, right? So the decisions about who gets the first rounds of it are super, super important. And then there's the communication part of it too, right? There were many people who were skeptical about that, including a lot of folks I've talked to in BIPOC communities, right? Based upon history of, testing experimental vaccines on the Black community and things like that. And how the city communicates that, and it is going to have a big impact
Yeah.
on whether people actually are willing to get vaccinated. And we get to the point where we have some kind of herd immunity in our community based on enough people getting vaccinated.
Yeah, that rollout is going to be really something. That's a big test for her coming this year as well. Just to wrap up on this, I think we're going to get a ton of candidates potentially for mayor. I'm thinking back to last year with the city council races. Democracy vouchers are going to be for the first time involved in the mayor's race there. And if last year's council races were any indication, I think we're going to get a ton of people registering to try to run to be mayor. Your thoughts about that, Kevin?
I think there are two ways it could go. It could go a complete free for all with a ton of people running, 20 people running, or it could close down really, really quickly, right?
Yeah.
Where,
who's got the support
and who comes out early and scares away other candidates,
right?
Next year there's there are 4 races: city attorney, mayor, and the 2 citywide city council positions, which are Gonzalez and Mosqueda. And Gonzalez and Mosqueda are 2 names that have been thrown around a lot as 2 people who have ambitions to run for mayor.
Yeah.
Right.
No,
So
Gonzalez was thinking about running for state attorney general not that long ago. Keep going.
And so they have some hard choices. Like, do I run for reelection in my current seat, or do I shift over to this other one? Right.
It's a big decision.
And how quickly to go, right? If one of them, announced this week that they were running, right, there'd be a lot of people, particularly Councilmember Mosqueda, who has just a ton of, she's a former labor organizer, right? You could argue she's still a labor organizer. But knowing how much support labor has in the city and how labor tends to get the way in terms of who wins elections in the city, if Mosqueda came out very early and said, I'm, threw hat into the ring for running for mayor, that would scare away a lot of other candidates. Like there's no, particularly other ones who nominally would be labor candidates.
Say, right.
Well, there's no way I'm beating Mosqueda, so I'm staying out of this, right? So I think the race, there's probably a lot of people scrambling right now to make decisions and to figure out, okay, like, who are my announcement day supporters going to be, that I can say, like, okay, I've got endorsements from these unions or these other organizations that will just keep other people out of the race.
Wow. I can't wait to see how that plays out, because as we're going to talk about in a little bit, the council, of course, is facing a lawsuit from the Chamber of Commerce here in the city of Seattle regarding its payroll tax, which Councilmember Mosqueda championed there. All right, let's move on to Now Hear This. All right, so this is the part of the show where we usually roll a soundbite your way from the week prior. This week, a little bit of an exception here. We're talking about the city of Seattle found in contempt in U.S. District Court on allegations that the SPD violated a judge's injunction restraining the use of crowd control weapons. So what you're about to hear and see on Converge Media is from a September 7th protest outside of the Seattle Police Officers Guild headquarters down in Soto there. And a warning here real quick, you may find this video and audio disturbing. It's an officer pepper spraying someone with no apparent provocation. Let's listen.
Move back! Move back! Move back! Move back! Move back!
Kevin, you embedded this video in your very comprehensive piece in Seattle City Council Insight about this. Judge Richard Jones found 4 cases that were compliant, 4 that were violations, but so many of these cases were inconclusive. That was a big takeaway for me here. Some of your big takeaways from the judge's contempt ruling.
Yeah, and Judge Jones is very frustrated about the fact that so many were inconclusive, that there wasn't clear evidence that said whether these were proper uses of blast balls or other what they call less lethal devices.
Yes, right.
Or whether they were improper, right? And and it was, at this point, lack of evidence submitted by either party on body worn videos, incident reports from the police officers, and that was something that again was pretty alarming to the judge. Say, like, that I'm pretty disturbed by the fact that I can't tell on most of these.
Right.
What
shouldn't we have a better record of that?
Whether it was appropriate or not on that. And there is a lot more. There's hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands, of hours of body worn video on that. Right. But this was done in very short order. right? So on a on a super expedited timeline,
Yeah.
and going through all those videos just takes, you know, days and days and weeks for, so, you know, eventually, because I'm sure OPA is investigating more of those incidents, we'll see more of that video and all that, but it's just going to take time. So doing this on like an expedited basis for, you know, a contempt charge on a preliminary injunction, is just on a very, very different timeline for doing that.
And I thought it was really interesting too, just on this piece about the different cases that he found, okay, they're compliant or they're not. The fact that he found 4 that were not over the course of several days did not indicate to him that, oh, the police are doing a great job, we only found these 4 cases. It was mainly this point that he couldn't really tell what was going on, right? Was that his,
And
his thought?
that sort of came to the end. It's like, you know, am I concluding that there were only 4 cases out of all these uses of blast balls? And or, you know, is it, you know, I've got 4 clearly compliant ones and 4 clearly non-compliant ones. And he said it's really the latter, because, you know, I don't know what to make of all of those other ones. They could be non-compliant.
Such a challenge here.
So in the balance, I see 4 good and 4 bad. And so, you know, these are not just sort of incidental technical ones here.
No, it was.
And there was another larger issue that came out around what's called Monel liability. Which is the question of whether you can hold the city or you know, a government liable for the
actions of
individual
one
actions
officer
of their employees. And you know, the Monel standard for this says that you can only hold the government liable if you can show that the individual's actions were based upon a stated custom or practice of the city, right? And or policy, custom, practice. But you know, that there's no case law on whether the Monel standard holds for a contempt charge. And the city couldn't produce any case law precedents that says it does. And the judge said, based on that, I'm going to say it doesn't, particularly because the preliminary injunction that the city actually helped write says the city, the police department, and the officers. So like the city knew what this was going in.
Yep. And I guess the city's next move here, appeal, whatever else. I know there's a few pieces moving here.
So the next move is imminently, in fact, you know, probably within a couple of hours of when we're recording this, the plaintiffs are going to submit their proposed sanctions against the city.
That's right.
And then the city will have a week to respond to that. That doesn't preclude the city appealing it. I haven't heard any indication that they are going to appeal it at this point,
but
they might, you know, and I think, again, this issue about Monel liability applying to contempt charge is a really interesting issue that the Ninth Circuit Court might actually want to wrestle with.
All right.
That would be really up their alley in terms of kind of big, you know, larger issues that are really worth wrestling with, rather than kind of wrestling with the facts.
Okay. Let's stick with the courtroom chatter for just a little bit and try to move on to another huge story. It was just a fire hose of news over this past week here.
No kidding.
In case you missed it, folks, the Seattle Metropolitan Chamber of Commerce has filed a lawsuit against the city over its big business payroll tax set to go into effect next year. So, Kevin, another great legal breakdown. Thank you on SCC Insight about this. The chamber trying to make this case that this would be a tax on the right, not the privilege, to earn a living. And there's some case law on this. What do you make of that argument? You had a very cogent piece on this, I thought.
So the payroll tax is an excise tax.
Yes.
Right? And excise taxes, which are basically transactional taxes, can only apply to things that are privileges, not rights.
Yes.
And there's case law in the state which says very clearly that, you know, an individual's right to earn a living, whether it's by holding a job or by starting up their own business or whatever, is a right. You have a right to earn a living. It's not a privilege. That's not something you could impose an excise tax. You can impose, you know, an income tax on people, which is not an excise tax. It's a different class of taxes.
Yes.
Not an excise tax, right?
Right.
And so what the Chamber of Commerce has said in this is that, you know, the payroll tax is a tax, an excise tax on the right to earn a living, and therefore it's illegal. But this is a really weak case. And I think my expectation is this is going to toss really quickly for the very simple reason that this is not a tax on employees.
Right.
This is a tax on employers. It's being paid by employers. Employees don't pay this tax. And in fact, it's written into the payroll tax that employers may not pass this cost through or deduct from paychecks to pay this payroll tax.
Right. Okay.
So it's not taxing the right to earn a living, right?
Yeah.
It's taxing employers for arguably the privilege to have employees in the city.
Yeah. It just really turns into an interesting legal chess game here, though, Kevin. I thought you brought this up well, too. So let's say Amazon could potentially sue the city on this. They have not, but you really made the case that they could here. But if they did, then they'd have to release a lot of different information, which they don't want to. Help me out with this piece.
So, Amazon actually probably has a stronger case against this because there's various tiers in this payroll tax, and the highest tier, the size of the payroll you have to have in order to qualify for that means that basically there's only one company in the city,
which is Amazon.
And it's Amazon. So basically, this payroll tax is written so that Amazon is taxed more than everybody else, and they could come back and say that's punitive. You're singling us out, which is illegal. They can't do that,
right?
And so they could probably get a toss based on that. But in both cases, in case of sort of the Chamber of Commerce's tax, and this one, if this gets to discovery, which the Chamber of Commerce one may not, they may get tossed before that. If either of them would get to discovery, then the Chamber of Commerce or Amazon would actually have to cough up information about the actual payroll of the companies,
which has been so difficult to track. Yeah, keep going.
Yeah, the city doesn't have that, right? The state has that because they do B&O tax, right? Right. But the state doesn't pass on information on individual companies. They pass on just aggregate information about classes within, and in fact, they wouldn't even tell the city any information about sort of this highest tier of classes, how many companies would be in there. Because there's so few that it would basically reveal information about individual companies. So they wouldn't even do that, right?
Wow.
But if Amazon sued and it got to discovery, they would have to reveal what their actual payroll numbers are in the city.
That's a big piece of this, and I'm not sure if that's going to happen anytime soon, but definitely a legal case we're going to keep watching there. We're going to move on to our final segment here. What's next? Okay, so for our What's Next segment this week, what's next in terms of leadership for the city? A lot of political commentary going on about this over the past couple of weeks. Mayor Durkin not running again, Chief Carmen Best stepping down earlier this year, and now Seattle School Superintendent Denise Juneau is not getting her contract renewed. These are all separate stories, and I think it's important to look at that and look at some of the nuances that are behind them. But Kevin, I just wanted your general take on this. What is your thought about all this leadership churn? What impact does it have on a city when you have city leaders that have a shorter tenure? Some thoughts on this.
Yeah, and there are people starting to speculate out there that it may be a long time before we ever see a two-term mayor in Seattle again.
Yeah.
We've had a string of one-term mayors.
Four out of the last 5. Yeah.
Yeah. That it's a tough job, and it's a tough job because. The city is very vocally split. It's amusing because it's largely vocally split between the center left and the progressive left.
That's right.
The city. So we don't focus on the things we agree on. We focus on very angrily on the things that we disagree on. But that makes it hard to govern in this city, right? Where there are a number of wedge issues, right?
Yeah.
And there are a number of emergencies in the city, right? Especially at this moment in time. And the economic realities and the economic divisions are very visible, right?
Yeah.
Super visible right now.
Yeah.
And that is raising tensions across the city as well.
Of course.
Right? And we'll see what happens. We talked earlier about the fact that there are 2 open citywide positions on the city council this year.
Right.
We'll see what happens with those as well. This isn't just the mayor, right?
That's right. That's right.
This is going to spill, and district.
Those are powerful positions on the council.
And district-based elections for city council, really look like they have a pretty different dynamic than the city-based positions.
Very much so.
Right now,
yeah.
Right? Because a very different set of people. We have some clear demographic differences in some of the districts in the city. Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
When you aggregate it all up together in the city, we're still 65% white.
Yeah. Right.
And majority, living in single family residence homes.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? And that is going to have an impact on these citywide races.
I guess in looking at this, though, I'm trying to figure out who that candidate is, because I think we certainly saw in the last round of elections for the city council, those chamber-backed candidates, the traditionally business-backed candidates, they didn't do all that well. I'm thinking about that. And I'm just trying to figure out who that candidate is. I think they're going to need some type of business support, some level of business support, but then they really need to be answering to these different efforts the city's doing there to reach out to BIPOC communities and things of that nature. Who is that candidate? I'm just trying to figure out who that is.
I mean, let's put some context around, what you said about the last round. I mean, the last round of elections was district-based. Right?
Yes, that's true.
All
that's
district-based,
true.
right?
That's true.
And quite frankly, several of the chamber-backed candidates were doing really, really well until Amazon dumped $150,000.
Right.
In right at the last minute. And there was just a huge backlash to that.
That's right.
I mean, it looked like Sawant was going to lose. Right?
For a minute there, sure.
In the end, after that huge groundswell support at the last minute, she got a little over 51% of the vote.
Right.
So it's not like she blew that out.
No, you're right. You're right.
And
you're right.
And there were some other close elections around the city as well.
Yeah.
So and again, those are district based, right? So the demographics matter more than they
Agreed.
They do,
yeah,
right?
the makeup of the districts.
Specific districts. You can get elected with a smaller number of votes.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, this is a citywide piece we're talking.
But you're right. I mean, it's if somebody's going to try to run as a moderate or a uniter, they're going to have to reach across some pretty severe divisions right now.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And they're, as well as speak to big economic issues, because we are certainly still in the middle of economic crisis in the city. And when it goes downtown, that's really, really clear, right?
Yeah.
Amazon doesn't seem to be investing in more jobs in Seattle right now. They seem to really putting them into Bellevue, as well as other places around the country.
Got to get real about that.
We're going to have to deal with COVID and roll out of vaccines, as well as economic restrictions on restaurants and bars and other things. And
all that.
Figure out at what point do we start lifting those, and we may not be done with that by the end of 2021.
Yeah.
Right? But people are going to be campaigning around a bunch of those issues
and clamoring for
homelessness. There's still just a huge uproar about homeless camps and parks right now, right? And on our streets, and are we really doing enough about that, and how we maintain this balance between keeping our parks and open spaces and public spaces open while also taking care of the homeless community in the city.
Yeah. I know public safety too. That's going to drag well into next year when we start talking and
police.
And from there on out, making sure, we have a good amount of public safety, the level of police staffing, all that kind of stuff. That's a
police
huge
reform,
piece of this too.
Bridge infrastructure maintenance. There's so many of these different issues.
Yeah. They're not a lot of small ones out there.
But at least we know what people are going to be talking about in election this year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, that's true. It's a preview of coming attractions. And you think about that, we're talking about 11 months away, but you can still see some of these gears turning here in terms of how people are going to go through this. Of course, the primaries in August there, but you think about this is really going to get fired up over the next several months. It's going to be an exciting year for the mayor's race and those council races too. So we always like to finish up our podcast with a look at some tasty treats to have on your coffee break. Quick disclosure, I will not be eating anything on air. It's one of my favorite things to do, but Kevin actually made a promise last week to share his insights on how to make the store-bought cupcakes taste like homemade. Kevin, what manner of sorcery is this?
First,
what do you got? We got something else cooking.
My daughter and I made gingerbread cookies because 'tis the season for gingerbread cookies.
So. Oh, that's awesome. Got to do that. But you have some other knowledge you want to share here. What do we got?
So yeah, I did make a promise. Talk about if you're going to make cake from one of those store-bought cake mix boxes.
I've always been a Betty Crocker guy. Keep going. Yeah.
You pick the best one. Betty Crocker is really kind of the best one, and I'll tell you in a minute how you can tell it's the best one.
Nice. I knew I was a genius. Yeah.
So 5 steps to making cake from a box, which is almost indistinguishable from whether it's cake or cupcakes. Indistinguishable from making it from scratch.
Yes.
Number 1, preheat your oven.
I'm writing this down. Okay.
And when I say preheat your oven, it means 2 things. First of all, don't assume that the thermostat that's built in your oven is right, because they're almost always wrong. Go out and buy an oven thermometer and stick it in your oven and verify the temperature. So as soon as you open the door to that oven, all that air is rushing out, and the temperature of your oven drops 20 degrees. And it may take another 10 minutes to get back up to the main temperature. Wait another 10 minutes, let the walls come up to the temperature, and then you can have a much easier time sustaining that temperature in your oven.
Okay.
Number 2, bring all the ingredients up to room temperature first, including the eggs. We tend to just sort of pull the eggs out of the fridge and use them right away. Eggs are, eggs are fine at room temperature for at least a couple of days.
Yeah,
right? In
right.
other countries where they don't wash them as much as we wash them here, they're good for weeks at room temperature.
My
But
mom always did that. Yeah.
yeah, here, like, get them out a couple of hours before, let them come to room temperature. If you forget in the last minute, stick them in a bowl of room temperature water for like 15 minutes.
Okay. Okay.
So,
There's
but get
some prep
all
going on here. Okay.
so all the ingredients up to room temperature first, right? Because if they're colder, that's going to affect how long it takes for them to bake in the oven.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right?
Okay. Interesting.
Third,
okay.
take that box mix and sift it. Run it through your sifter or run it through a fine strainer.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
And this is a place where you really get to notice the difference between the different kinds of box cake mixes.
Sure. Okay.
You get to see what's left over at the end.
All right.
In your sifter, and it can be a little gross, but
got to get that stuff out of there. Okay. Yeah.
Fourth, mix all the dry ingredients together, mix all the wet ingredients together separately, and then bring them together. Right.
What's that? Why do that?
Well, because if you put like if you've got like sugar or salt or something else that you're adding, or some other flavoring that you're adding in, it may, and you don't mix it all in together, it may not get evenly distributed.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
Or think about eggs, right?
Yeah,
eggs really, if you're beating them, you have to beat them for about 45 seconds before they're really like, all the
true story. Yeah.
All the sort of filaments and everything inside really get broken down and it's consistent. Otherwise it just clumps.
Yeah.
And so if you don't do that, you just get more clumps of eggs in one place. You really want it to be nice and consistent through the
Got it. Okay.
And the last thing is, how long do you bake it for?
Tell me, what is it?
You bake them until they're done. The way you tell when they're, and this is really important.
I knew you were going to say that. Yeah.
The way this is really important. So the way you tell they're done is you kind of open up the oven door and you tap them on top. And if it bounces back, it's done.
Ah, okay.
If it stays indented, it's not done yet.
Okay. Got it. Gotta have the bounce on
and that there's all these recipes have a recommended time on them, and they're almost always too long. Right.
Okay.
So like standard Betty Crocker cake mix will say like 24 minutes.
Yeah.
For
you're checking when are you checking there? You looking in 16, there?
16.
Wow. What?
If I do all these other things right, it's done in 16. Right. Wow. So they want you to make sure that you are thoroughly baking them. Right. So you don't have raw egg in them or anything like that. But you're almost always over baking them. So that's why they come out dry. Right. So you bake them until they're done.
Okay.
Not the time that it says on the box.
Wow, Kevin, this is a breakdown to this. I've learned new things.
You do these 5 things, and it will completely revolutionize your ability to make cake from a box.
I cannot wait to try this out. Kevin, thank you so much for all the insight here. My mind is blown right now. I so appreciate talking with you, my friend. Wow.
I'm doing, bringing it
to the
Seattle
people.
Politics and,
that's right.
And the cake, right?
That's the way it's got to be. Well, thank you so much. The next time you want to know what's happening in local politics, folks, listen to Seattle News, Views, and Brews. Find out what's brewing. You can subscribe on iTunes, Spotify, wherever you listen, and please support us on Patreon if you like what you're hearing. We need your help to keep this thing going, so we could really use your help there. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks for watching on Converge Media too. Woohoo! See you next time. Seattle News, Views, and Brews is an independent production of Callanan Media Services. Copyright 2020.